Coming up on Yellow Chair Collective, the podcast.
Care come from? This sense of advocacy and justice that was instilled in you?
Probably my family. Yeah, that's something that has been very important to them. The idea of giving back and the idea of making sure that you stay connected to the community and that no one person is ever better than the other. That was a belief that was instilled in me from my family. There's more if we all...
We are Yellow Chair Collective, a passionate psychotherapist group based in California and New York. But Yellow Chair Collective has a deeper meaning too. Yellow Chair is a place of hope and enlightenment for other Asian Americans. We're a team of specialized therapists where each clinician at Yellow Chair Collective has particular areas of expertise and practice. Listen to Yellow Chair Collective, the podcast, for more inspiring mental health content on how to further your growth as an individual. Let's get started.
Hi, welcome to Yellow Chair Collective, the podcast. My name is Helen Garcia, and today we have Alyssa Mancao, CSW, on the show. Okay. Given that it's Filipino American History Month, I did want to check in to see what part of the Philippines you were from.
I was born in Cebu. Yes.
My family is from Loag City and Mindanao, but I did want to just check in to see if there are anything significant about Filipino American history that you celebrate during the month, or karaoke or food celebration, anything of the like.
Actually, yesterday I hosted an event with two of my friends who are also Filipinas at a Filipino-owned salon in South Pasadena, where over 30 women showed up and we did yoga and journaling for over 2 hours. And it was hosted by Cafe 86. So we got to feed everybody ube crinkles. And everybody came from diverse cultures and backgrounds, but we all got to celebrate it together in that special way.
Yeah, I actually, was that the Healing Ate Circle, or was that am I thinking about a different event?
I think that's a different event. Ours was called Release to Reconnect.
Release to Reconnect. I guess, why was that important to participate in for you, out of curiosity?
Yeah, well, a few things, right? I think healing is incredibly crucial. And I think that when we talk about healing, we miss the point that healing happens when we're in the presence of other people, and healing happens when we can connect with like-minded people. And I think that's also a beautiful thing about the Filipino culture is we are very community-centered. We are very community. So I thought it would have been a really nice opportunity to bring parts of my culture during FAHM into the community that I have.
Yeah. Alyssa, I know that you've done a couple of pieces for the Huffington Post. You also have a group practice, but I kind of want to set a baseline as to how you became a therapist and give people a background as to what got you into this type of work. I have a lot of questions around your intersection between Filipino American identity and mental health. So I'd love for you to start on what got you into this career. Did this career find you, or did you find this career?
The career found me. Sometimes I think it, in a sense, happened by accident. I got my bachelor's degree in sociology with an emphasis in social work from Cal Poly Pomona, and I knew I wanted to be a social worker. I didn't know exactly what that meant or looked like, but I knew I wanted to work within the systems that can help other people while at the same time addressing the systems that are silencing people. So I just knew that social work was the career I wanted to go into. And I also know that can mean so many things. So then I ended up getting my master's in social work at USC, and my primary internship was more, I didn't feel like they were giving me a lot of work to do. And so I asked my friends, what type of work are you guys doing at your internships? And they're like, oh, we're doing therapy. And I didn't even know that was something that could be practiced. And so I went back to my internship and I said, can I do more therapy, please? Like, that's what my friends are doing. So I feel like I should be doing it too, And so they said, okay, we'll give you some clients where you can do a little bit of therapy. So that's how I started off. And I just haven't stopped ever since.
I guess, what what made you keep going? Because I also have a degree as an MSW, and like we're both LCSWs, and but I know that people get burnt out by the work that we do. There's compassion fatigue. There's almost a sense, or this knowledge I hear from people who aren't therapists, that the main question I always get is what keeps you in the work? Because I know therapists that are always exhausted. And so I guess that's my question of what made you keep going? And the other layer to that is what kept you going at the time. So it's a both and type of question.
I think I was really lucky that at the time, the nonprofit that I was working for was incredibly supportive, had a really good team. So I felt really, really connected to my supervisors and to my coworkers. They did a really good job of managing the amount of work that we did. And also, I was really passionate, was and am passionate about the work that I was doing. Like incredibly, I was working with juvenile offenders that were entangled up within the justice system. And so these are people that are highly marginalized. They're highly marginalized and they're highly stigmatized and they're highly stereotyped. And for me to be able to do that type of work and to see the changes that I saw at the levels that I saw, it was like pouring into my own cup, essentially. But the overall thing that keeps me going and has kept me going is I genuinely have hope. I genuinely have hope for people that they're going to get better at some point in their life. And I do feel that it is that belief that allows me, that essentially protects me from some level of fatigue.
So one of the things that we were talking about was in the Philippines, traveling back and forth. I immigrated when I was around 6, and I came back when I was around 10 and again at 15. And some of the feelings and experiences that I had was grief, confusion, and a little bit of sadness for the conditions that my relatives were going through. And this confusion of, I have so much, but I'm not as happy as these people. And so there's almost this understanding that sometimes you can live with so much and not even realize the value of how much you have. But it's interesting because when you live in American culture, bigger, better, faster, stronger is the belief that we live by. And I'm curious what your experience is living in American culture and also experiencing Filipino culture growing up.
So it's so different.
Yeah.
It is. And my cousin actually humbled me once when I was visiting. I think I was like a teenager. I saw these kids, they were playing on the sidewalk. I don't know, maybe I don't remember what they were playing with, but it couldn't have been something that they like just found on, couldn't have been more than something that they found on the sidewalk, and they were playing. And then I just thought to myself, like, oh, that's so sad. My cousin goes, what? And I was like, just that, like, look at what they're playing with. That's so sad. They must be so sad. And my cousin says, they're not. And you shouldn't assume that because it's not, it's not something that, because it's not like a PS5 or something, right? Or
Wow.
it was a PS5 at the time. But he's like, you shouldn't assume that just because it's not something you see kids, in your country playing with. I was like, people here are generally pretty happy. However, he said it, and it kind of gave me a mindset shift. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm operating under these Western standards of happiness to be affiliated with things more, whatever. So that really kind of shifted my mindset on what is important. What is important in order to bring happiness, because it's true, just the more you have isn't going to bring happiness.
It's interesting because I feel like we can connect this to our career as therapists, to not make assumptions. Where I was listening to this podcast interview with Esther Perel, and one of the things that she was sharing is everyone has a different melody that we don't always understand. Even from a therapist standpoint, as humans, we can immediately make snap judgments out of survival. And so I guess, like, what did that teach you about making assumptions, that one experience? in the Philippines?
I have to take off my the lens of which I viewed happiness as this like Western colonial lens that happiness can come in so many different forms.
Mm, that's good. Can you say more about that? Because I know
Mhm.
that some listeners may not have the understanding of the Western colonial lens and how that contributes to our understanding of other societies. Can you say more about?
Well, the Western colonial lens is like this belief that um, the more things you have, or the more technologically integrated that you are, the easier that life is, or the happier you can become. When really, just what I noticed in that moment that was so incredibly more fulfilling was that they were being present.
Mm,
Children, they were being children. They were being present, and they were engaging with each other, and they were living in community. And there is a sense of like feeling like, how I say this, there is this sense of hierarchy,
yeah.
right? It's very hierarchical in Western society. And I don't think any of that is real. I think it's all things that we have made up and then people have bought into, play into. And then when you go to another country, whether it's the Philippines or any other country that is far different than the United States, you kind of see how the different values really challenge some of the learning that we've had here. And those values are actually, I think, a lot more grounding and sustainable.
To your point, what values do you think non-Western societies enforce that are counterintuitive to Western culture, but actually help them?
Yeah, interdependence.
Mm,
Interdependence, the ability that we are all connected and can help each other and can fill in the gaps for each other is something that I've noticed in other cultures and societies. Whereas in Western culture, it is very much like only the strong survive and only the
mm,
strong can make it out type of mentality. And it's very independent, and you do things on your own. And at the end of the day, you have to take care of yourself. And so there
mm,
is just a lot of that happening. Um, and it's two very different ways of being.
mm. I loved how you talked about Western colonialism in a way that didn't clinicalize the experience. What I mean by that is
Mhm.
you talk about it in very simplistic terms. Non Western societies like the Philippines, in this example, people are more present because they have less. They have less to worry about. They don't think about themselves too much. When you counsel,
What we view as less. What we
can you
view
say
as
more
less.
about that?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say they have less, because I
Mm,
think it just depends on what we are defining as less, right?
interesting.
I just think the values are different and the priorities are different.
I love that perspective because I feel like you're
Mhm.
shifting my own perspective right now
Mhm.
of, okay, I might perceive it as less, but perhaps to them, it's just a different way of living.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that goes back to the hierarchical mentality, right?
Mm,
Less, more, you know? It goes back to the
yeah.
hierarchical, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
How did you unlearn that for yourself? Because I think it takes a different level of awareness to notice even the way that language is being used in a
mhm,
conversation. Like, what was your
mhm. Uh, it's interesting. I don't know if there was actually a process, but I would probably kick it back to that conversation I had with my cousin when he looked at me and he was kind of like, "How dare you? How dare you assume that these children who are playing and smiling and laughing aren't happy because, because they don't have the things that you've seen children in America grow up with." I think that was kind of like what did it for me. I was like, "Oh my gosh, he's right." Like that was actually really stupid because these kids are laughing and they're having fun, but here I am thinking this is the saddest thing I've ever seen in my life. Um, So I would say that conversation with him was really helpful, but also it's my own experience of going back home. I feel so full when I'm there because when I go to the Philippines, it's not a vacation, although I wish it would be. It's like I'm going home. Like I'm going home. I have a room. I have things to do. People are bossing me around, whatever. It's like, but even when I'm there, it just I feel full, and
Mm,
I feel I feel really satisfied. And I see that my family is also satisfied too. So
mm.
I think it's just the experience of having the privilege to be able to go back and forth,
Mm.
being
I know that
exposed.
feeling. I know
Hmm.
that feeling because I remember every time I step off the plane from like Philippine Airlines and I'm at the airport, I see people and I feel like even though I've never met them, I feel it like I'm home. And it
Gosh, yeah.
you know that feeling? It's almost
Humidity hits you and you're just like, "Oh, I'm home."
the humidity, the smell, like even
The
if it's
smell.
yeah, well, I don't
Yeah.
land. I usually take a connecting flight from Manila to like wherever I'm from, but like it's almost like they know me and I know them. Like there's something so different about living in the United States where there's almost like this don't hurt me, like don't come near me, give me space. And then everyone is of a different culture, but I used to think of it as well, everyone just looks like me, so I feel at home. But it's also I don't know what you would contribute that to of like it's just oh I don't feel like I have to fend for myself when I'm here. I feel belonging. And I just don't know if I get that whenever I landed at like Las Vegas airport or LAX.
Right. Oh yeah, you're not looking at people like, "Hey."
No,
you know, all
no.
doughy-eyed and like, "Hey, we're family." Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I don't feel the same way when I land in other places. Yeah, there's a sense of familiarity. It is the
Mm,
familiarity that we experience when we are home because it is home. It's home.
yeah. How do you when you talk about going back and forth from the Philippines to the US, like I'm for me, I can't speak for you, but for me, I feel this like weird reassimilation process when I come back to the United States. What is it like for you when you go back and forth to these two different countries?
See, gosh, I don't think I experienced the reassimilation process. If I'm understanding that right, I think because unfortunately, I don't stay long enough.
Mm,
But what it does is I try when I leave the Philippines, I try to remember what's important.
mm,
When I am in the US, I do notice that my lifestyle is different. It's almost like a list of things to do. It's run by my daily tasks. I look at my daily tasks first,
mhm,
then whatever is left over, I have time for me. Whereas in the Philippines, it's the opposite.
mm,
It's with my family, it's the opposite. It's like, oh, what do we have going on today as a family?
mm.
And then let me get done my stuff like in between or before,
Yeah,
because it's usually like a family party or we're all going to lunch together or let's go to the beach. Like that's the priority. And then it's like, okay, well, let me get my stuff done. I try to hold those values close to me,
mm,
even if it's not with my titas and titos, right? Out here, it's like, okay, well, what do I have for myself first?
mm.
Then whatever is on my list of things to do can be put in where there is time.
I didn't know that was a Filipino value, but it makes sense.
Mhm.
The way that I operate and that I think is a
Mhm.
lot of like a Filipino way of thinking. What are we doing first?
What are we doing? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I'm making a lot of connections right now. Thank you.
Oh, right. Yeah. Because when you go home, they'll just be like, okay, well, just make sure that you're at this restaurant by 12 because we're having lunch with your blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay.
I
But
love that.
it's pleasant and it's nice. But over here, it's more of like, I'll let you know if I can make it because I have all these other things to do first.
I
Right.
hate that.
It's
That's
very,
actually
so
a pet peeve of mine, actually.
yeah. But there it's opposite. It's like, first connection, then whatever else is left.
Yeah,
Mhm.
my best friend is Filipina. She actually grew up in Cebu.
Oh, nice.
And this was my mess up as a young, mostly Americanized, like 22-year-old. But I was a bridesmaid for her wedding. And I remember there were so many other things that I put on top of my list of Helen has to take care of herself. And then she can go to these like bridesmaid duties
Mhm.
for her best friend's wedding. And my best friend grew up in the Philippines, and she was like, you made a commitment to show up to these things and
Mm.
you didn't follow through. And I think, I still want you to be part of my wedding, but it really hurts when you give me your word and you don't come. And I remember being confused about that of, well, you're not being understanding of the fact that I also have XYZ things. And now as an adult, having more of an understanding of culture, but also belonging, it makes you realize that there's just a different way. And it's almost like this air that you don't really know how to, like, I guess, bridge when you're that age.
Huh.
Yeah. Did you ever struggle with that?
When you say that, what do you mean specifically?
Just not really knowing what value is getting in between you and another person. Because I guess what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to transition into just like multi generational misunderstanding that can
Mm.
happen between friendships and family when you are of a different culture and you grow up. Well, I grew up being Filipino in one home and then American outside. And so I guess I'm curious if you ever struggled with that and how you managed to gain a deeper, I guess, healing and understanding of that type of division.
I think I would have to reflect more deeply on it because just first consideration of your question, I'm thinking I don't think I've ever experienced that. Um, but
Mm,
I also think it's because I was probably exposed to both cultures early on
hmm.
that I was essentially able to just switch back and forth. Right?
Really?
When I'm with like my Filipino side of the family, then I kind of recognize this is like, okay, this is what we're doing today, and then I'll put this aside for later. But also because, and my family too, they're pretty. I think I'm pretty lucky. I think I'm pretty
Mm,
lucky in the sense that like they're supportive and communicative to a degree when they'll say like, hey, you're doing a lot right now. Can you spend time with us? It's like, oh yeah, I'm sorry about that. Like, so they don't really make you um, feel bad for it. But I also think it's important to recognize that no one way of being is like wrong. They're just
mm,
different.
mm.
They're just different, and no one way of being is right either.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just have to be able to do what works for you while recognizing if it's working for the context that you're in as well.
Yeah. I guess
Mhm.
I'm actually really appreciative of this
Mhm.
perspective that you just said of not one way of being is right or wrong. I kind of want to jump back into your career timeline because you did start working for a nonprofit and the nonprofit was incredibly supportive. How did you end up at private practice or group practice and then writing? How did you stumble into that?
So the nonprofit, this is how supportive the nonprofit that I worked with was, maybe even to a detriment. So they allowed us to use our offices for private practice. Up
Wow.
yeah, I know you never hear that, and for free.
No.
So we all had our own offices anyway. We didn't share. It was nothing. We all had our own offices, and we got to decorate however we wanted. And our clients would visit us, and I had a huge office, and so that was one of the benefits of working there. It's like you get to use your office if you want to start a private practice for free, and you get to use it for up to um, X amount of hours per week. And I was like, okay, let me experiment with this. I don't have to pay overhead. This is not a loss for me. let me just try it because it's something I'm interested in. And as soon as I announced, maybe that was like a Psychology Today profile or something, that I'm starting my private practice, immediately filled up those slots,
Wow.
those 5 hours a week. I immediately filled it to the point where I had to seek outside rental to supplement,
Wow.
because I was going over my time. I was like, okay, I'm going to see some here. I'm going to see some somewhere else. I started seeing people somewhere else, and then that got filled up really fast. So I was like, I think
Whoa.
I can. I don't think I need to work at a nonprofit anymore. And
What was that like what was that like for you to open a private practice and then
mhm,
have every slot filled? Like,
mhm,
I can't
yeah,
imagine what that must have been like for you. Surprise almost.
it was really, really surprising, and it was a little confusing because I never in my life thought I would be doing private practice to the degree that I'm doing it in.
Yeah.
And it was confusing too to be able to say goodbye to the community that I was essentially had gone to school for, my whole life.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was a little bit of a challenge and a transition, and but it was also a big risk. It was a big risk, you
Well,
know.
yeah, because for the listener or
Mhm,
listeners that don't know, for a lot of therapists, you do have to get your hours to become licensed. And we're talking more about the state of California.
mhm,
And then as a therapist, I think you're used to taking on client work and having more of that consistent outcome. But when someone goes into private practice, they are entering more into the entrepreneurial route and starting a business because private practice is essentially a business.
mhm.
And so I guess I'm curious about, you got into the work for the sake of advocacy and social work and social justice. When you started your private practice, what type of clients did you start taking on, and what got you to shift more into the private practice realm?
A lot of the clients that I was taking on when I first started private practice, they were a lot of people in their 20s and up
Hmm.
that were wanting to work on either their marriages, their relationships, or careers, which again was different from the work I was doing, which was working with juveniles in the justice system,
Hmm.
right? Or the injustice system. So it was just a very different flow. But I do want to note that part of the reason too that I felt my shift towards private practice was because they were actually implementing a lot of red tape around the type of work that we could do in community mental health.
Yeah.
So when I started my private practice and I actually went full time, a lot of those clients that were in the system found me, and I was able to see a few of them pro bono and do the work the way I wanted to
Oh,
do it.
cool.
Right. So it was a really good balance for me and the work that I wanted to do. Both the work that I wanted to newly pursue, but the work that I also came in to this field for.
I'm smiling right now for the people listening because I started in community mental health for the same
Mhm.
reason. I didn't work in juvenile justice, but I did work with a lot of multi generational trauma, children with special needs. And one of the things that I kept coming up against was the restrictions around what I can and can't, how long I could work with them, the time given. And so entering into private practice with Yellow Chair gave me the opportunity to do more advocacy work for folks. And it was a shift in my mindset of, it doesn't have to look like this. It doesn't have to look like nonprofit work. Sometimes you can do so much more having full reign and full agency. I do want to ask a very random question, Alyssa, of out of all the articles that you've written, which one was your favorite?
Gosh. Hmm. I'm like, what have I written?
When I used to have an Instagram and
Hmm.
I was an intern at a community mental health agency, Brandon Shindo told me about you. And I remember reading one of your Huffington Post articles, and I remember thinking like, oh, this is a Filipina woman who's also a therapist, whose work I'd love to thank one day. I don't even remember what article I read, but I
Mhm.
never got a chance to thank you. But I've always wanted to ask you this question of, like, you've made so many strides in your career that I guess I'm curious around, like, what your favorite piece of writing was.
Gosh. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that with me. That's really cool. I like that
Yeah.
we know the same people.
Yeah.
Uh, well, I'll say one of my most viral articles was on emotional incest. That one
Hmm.
got a lot of traction, but maybe the one I, like the Rolodex of articles that I've written. Uh, Rewarding article was how to talk to your immigrant. It was either immigrant parents or just parents about racism. That was
Mm.
one.
Mm. Why was that pivotal for you, out of curiosity, or
Uh,
important for you to write?
oh yeah, it was important for me because I think it is important to address some of the deeply held beliefs that in our communities that are passed off as just normalized or okay,
Yeah.
well they're just old. But it was important to say no. These are things we can have discussions about. These are things that we absolutely need to address
Mm.
instead of fragilizing our elders or
Mm.
our parents and saying like they're not going to get it or they don't want to get it or they're never going to change. It's like well, they might. We should
Mm.
try.
I love that word,
Hmm.
fragilizing, turning it
Hmm.
into an adjective.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. I guess a lot of therapists, or most of the therapists I know, rarely go into writing. Um, how did you find yourself there?
Interestingly enough, Mindbody Green, I think, was the very first company that reached out to me for writing. And
Really?
and then I learned that the person who was allowing me to pitch articles, she was also Filipina. Like
Oh,
yeah, she disclosed that to me. I think after my article on racism, she was just like, actually, her mother is Filipina, I believe, or her father, one of them was Filipina. And so we talked about that for a little bit. So I thought that was really nice that she gave me the opportunity, to give a voice to
yeah.
our communities. Uh, and and then from there, different companies had just reached out to me for just more freelance work. I think it was just it just really happened organically. And it
Hmm.
might have been word of mouth from other articles that I've done.
Mm.
And each time I write an article or I'm connected with a company, I do really try to push for a representation. So I just
Mm.
wrote an article recently for Wonder Mind, which is Selena Gomez's mental health company, on I believe it was for them about stereotypes within the Asian community and how do we combat them. So that was another really good one.
It's beautiful. I know that in the entrepreneurial realm, it's a lot of saying
Mhm.
yes to different types of opportunities.
Mhm.
With the wisdom and the years that you've had in therapy and in writing and in different types of media, when do you know that a situation is wise to say yes to and when it's wise to say no to? What discernment do you use in those moments?
A value standpoint, is it wise to say yes to if it is in alignment with my values and in alignment with my learning?
Mm.
Then there's the financial aspect, right? Is it
Hmm.
wise to say yes to if it's going to help elevate my company and the
Mm.
ability to hire more, do more? But the values also has to be in alignment first.
Okay.
And then it's wise to say no if my body is screaming at me not to do it. Don't have time for it. It's not financially worth. And when I say financially worth it, I mean I'm not talking about low numbers or anything like that. I'm talking about the money that's being offered isn't worth compromising my values,
Oof.
right?
This could
So,
be clipped into
hmm
a, that's
hmm
so good. If
hmm
my body is
hmm
screaming at me to say no because no amount of money is worth risking that, compromising that. Yeah. Did you learn that lesson the hard way? Or have you learned that lesson?
I haven't learned that lesson the hard way. And again, I want to say I'm pretty lucky. I've been connected with other therapists who are in similar roles as myself. So there's a lot of, hey, can you check me? Hey, am I being greedy right now? Hey, is my thought process making sense? Hey, and so it's people that can say like, okay, let's see what this would look like if you pursued it or if you didn't. So I think I got really lucky to not have to learn the hard way so far.
I love that. I'm feeling a level of gratitude right now for you, Alyssa, for taking the amount of entrepreneurial risk that you've taken. Because I think as an intern turned therapist, I don't think I would have gotten here without your example. And I'm not, I want to be clear in that I'm not blowing smoke at all. I think it's really rare to see someone embody the power and the worth that they have as an individual. And it's such a great thing to witness because you are expanding your group practice. And I'd love to give you the space and time to discuss that, of like what groups you're promoting, the name of your group practice, what what offerings you have, specialties, different, modalities that you guys offer in your group practice, just so if people are interested, they can check you out.
Thank you. So in my group practice, we did just hire a pre-licensed therapist who's offering sessions at a lowered rate, but I also have a licensed therapist. We also offer Reiki. We also offer Reiki for in-person sessions at our Sherman Oaks location. Our Reiki specialist is also Filipina. And then we're looking to start up a wait list for people who are interested in a skills group surrounded around navigating their emotional landscape around motherhood. And once in a while, I do in-person events where everybody gets to leave with free things from our sponsors. And that stuff, everything I just mentioned can be found on my website, alyssamariewellness.com.
Alyssa, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This was such a fun interview.
Thank you, Helen. It was nice to finally meet you. I know we've had to reschedule this a few times, so it was good to meet you.
Of course. Happy to do it. All right.